There is a silent question that lingers beneath the lives of many sensitive people, a question they rarely say out loud but feel in their bones. Why do individuals who are so gentle, so intuitive, and so emotionally open suddenly become feared the moment they awaken to their true power? Society loves the myth of the empath as the soft-hearted healer, the person who absorbs the pain of others without protest. But this image is incomplete. It comforts those who want empathy without accountability. What it hides is the reality that when an empath integrates their shadow and becomes fully aware of their own psychological depth, they are no longer fragile, they are formidable. Carl Jung would say that true sensitivity is not passive. It is a form of perception that reaches into the unconscious of other people, noticing things they haven't named, admitted, or even recognized within themselves. Most people wear a persona so polished that they forget it's a mask. But the awakened empath sees through it with unsettling accuracy. They sense contradictions, emotional tensions, symbolic signals, and hidden wounds that others work hard to keep buried. And this ability does not disappear when the empath gains strength. It becomes sharper. This is the moment an empath becomes something else, a super empath, not a character of fantasy, but a psychologically awakened human being who refuses to be manipulated, guilt-trapped, or emotionally controlled. A super empath is compassionate, but not compliant, understanding, but not blind, soft-hearted, but protected by a mind that sees patterns, motives, and intentions before they fully appear. They do not seek conflict, yet their very clarity exposes the hidden dynamics other people rely on to maintain power. This is why manipulators, narcissists, and emotionally chaotic personalities fear them. A super empath does not just feel what others feel. They interpret the architecture behind those feelings, the emotional blueprints that reveal who someone really is beneath their performance. And no strategy, charm, or deception works on someone who sees the truth before the lie fully forms. In this video, you will learn the 7 reasons why a true super empath is not only misunderstood, but feared. You will understand why Jung believed that when emotional sensitivity merges with shadow integration, it becomes one of the most potent psychological forces a human being can embody. And if these words resonate with you, it's not because you're imagining things, it's because you were never too sensitive, you were awakening.
The first reason a true super empath is considered dangerous is their ability to perceive emotional truth with a clarity that most people are not prepared for. While others focus on what is said, the super empath perceives what is meant. They sense the tension behind a smile, the hesitation behind confidence, and the pain behind sarcasm. Nothing in them is passive. Their sensitivity functions like a psychological radar, reading the emotional field long before anyone else notices a shift. This makes many people uneasy, because the truth they try so hard to hide is simply visible to the empath without effort. Most people move through life behind a carefully constructed persona, the social mask that Jung described as a necessary but misleading part of the psyche. This mask hides insecurity, shame, resentment, and fear. And for many, it hides these things even from themselves. But a super empath does not interact with the mask. They interact with the emotional reality behind it. They do not need explanations or confessions. They sense inconsistencies in tone, microexpressions, energetic shifts, and symbolic phrases that reveal the unconscious content a person is trying to suppress. To the empath, these subtleties are not subtle at all. They are loud. This is why manipulators find the super empath so threatening. Manipulation requires illusion, and illusion cannot survive in front of someone who sees truth instinctively. Gaslighting collapses when the target already understands what is actually happening. Guilt trips dissolve when the empath recognizes the emotional strategy behind them. Lies lose their power when the empath detects the moment the speaker's energy shifts away from authenticity. Even silence reveals intentions because the empath feels the emotional weight behind it. Jung once wrote that the unconscious speaks in symbols, and the super empath is fluent in that symbolic language. They understand that a joke can be a confession, that anger can be a shield, and that arrogance is often nothing more than a mask covering deep inferiority. Without trying, the empath recognizes these patterns, and because they do not confront them aggressively, people often underestimate the depth of their awareness. But internally, the empath is mapping the situation with precision. This ability makes the super empath both powerful and unsettling. People who live honestly feel seen and comforted in their presence. People who live in contradiction feel exposed. Simply by existing, the super empath becomes a mirror in which others accidentally see their own truth. And not everyone is ready for that reflection. This is why the first danger of the super empath lies not in what they do, but in what they see. A vision that penetrates the emotional surface and reaches directly into the psychological core. One of the most unsettling traits of a true super empath is their ability to absorb the emotional undercurrent of the people around them without trying. This is not mystical telepathy or supernatural perception. It is an advanced form of psychological sensitivity. While most people only register what is obvious, the super empath picks up the emotional data that others leak unconsciously. The tension in someone's posture, the shift in their breathing, the contradiction between their words and the feeling beneath them. They do not learn this ability, they live in it. It is the natural language of their nervous system. According to Jung, every person walks through life carrying two layers of self, the persona they present and the shadow they avoid. Most individuals barely understand their own shadow, let alone reveal it willingly. Yet the super empath senses it instantly. They feel the insecurity inside someone's arrogance, the longing beneath someone's indifference, or the resentment hidden behind someone's politeness. This creates a unique dynamic. The empath often knows what someone is feeling long before that person consciously realizes it. They are not guessing. They are responding to the emotional truth breaking through the mask. This ability is comforting to emotionally healthy people because being understood feels safe. But for those who rely on control, deception, or psychological manipulation, it is terrifying. A manipulator needs time to plant doubt or confusion. A narcissistic personality needs their charm to be believed. A toxic person needs their false narrative to become the accepted version of events. None of these strategies work when the empath senses the real motive the moment it enters the room. They see the shift in energy before the behavior even appears. What scares people is not that the super empath confronts them. It is the opposite. The empath often says nothing, but understands everything. They notice the emotional crack in someone's story, the bitterness behind a compliment, or the ownership hidden behind a guilt trip. They recognize these patterns instantly, but their silence makes others nervous. It is the silence of someone who cannot be fooled. This is why the super empath is often labeled too perceptive, too intense, or too sensitive. But the truth is far simpler. They absorb what others try to hide. And when someone who depends on psychological disguise stands in front of someone who cannot be deceived, fear is inevitable. The unconscious cannot remain unconscious in the presence of a super empath, and for many people, that exposure feels like danger. Another reason a true super empath is considered dangerous is their unsettling ability to awaken the shadow in other people.
Most individuals spend their lives avoiding the parts of themselves they don't want to acknowledge: insecurity, jealousy, envy, fear, resentment, desire for control, unhealed wounds. Jung called this hidden reservoir the shadow, and he emphasized that people defend themselves fiercely against seeing it. Yet the mere presence of a super empath can bring these buried traits to the surface, not through confrontation, but through contrast. When someone with emotional clarity stands in front of someone who is fragmented inside, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. A super empath carries an unusual combination of qualities: perceptiveness, emotional honesty, inner depth, and psychological integrity. These traits act like a light, and light exposes. When an empath listens without lying to themselves, others feel the weight of their own self-deception. When the empath remains calm, people become aware of their own reactivity. When the empath shows compassion without weakness, insecure individuals feel their own immaturity. This contrast makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to see the parts they've avoided. Jung once wrote that people will do anything to avoid facing their own souls. That avoidance becomes harder in the presence of someone who doesn't participate in denial. The empath doesn't mirror the persona, they mirror the truth behind it. And when people see their shadow reflected in the empath's clarity, they often react with irritation, defensiveness, or sudden hostility. They don't understand why they feel triggered, but the underlying reason is simple. The empath makes their unconscious conscious. This awakening effect can create two outcomes. For those who are ready to grow, the super empath becomes a catalyst, someone who inspires introspection, healing, and honesty. Their presence encourages emotional maturity. But for those who fear self-examination, the empath becomes an emotional threat, even if they've done nothing wrong. The person feels exposed, judged, or challenged, not by the empath's words, but by their existence. This is why empaths so often attract intense reactions: admiration, resentment, attachment, or rejection. The empath didn't provoke these responses deliberately. They simply lived truthfully, and truth is something many people cannot bear to see. The super empath awakens the shadow by standing in authenticity, and when someone is forced to feel the weight of their own hidden self, the easiest reaction is to blame the one who revealed it, even when the empath revealed nothing intentionally.
One of the most intimidating strengths of a true super empath is their ability to perceive manipulation long before it fully forms. Most people only realize they were manipulated after the damage is done, but the super empath senses the shift the moment it begins. Their emotional radar catches the earliest signs: the subtle guilt trick, the changed tone, the persuasive flattery, the sudden silence meant to create anxiety, or the strategic vulnerability designed to extract sympathy. These tactics don't register as maybe, they register as pattern, and the empath recognizes patterns instantly. This anticipation is not paranoia, it is pattern literacy. A super empath has spent years observing emotional behavior, often unconsciously, and they've cataloged thousands of microsignals into something close to intuitive expertise. When someone attempts to manipulate them, the empath doesn't just react to the tactic, they feel the intention behind it. They sense when a question has a hidden purpose, when a compliment has an agenda, when kindness is transactional, or when someone is exploring their emotional boundaries to test control. Jung would say that the super empath's gift is the ability to perceive the psychic field, the invisible psychological atmosphere people create around themselves. Manipulators, narcissists, and chaotic personalities rely on distortion to maintain dominance. They twist narratives, play roles, and shift identities depending on who they need to influence. But their strategies fall apart when the empath recognizes the script before the performance even begins. The empath notices the emotional temperature change, The slight tightening in someone's voice, the forced softness, the sudden urgency, and they understand the motive immediately. What truly terrifies manipulators is that the super empath does not argue. They do not expose the tactic in dramatic confrontation. They simply disengage, detach, or respond with clarity, and this neutralizes the manipulation effortlessly. A narcissist expects resistance so they can twist it. A manipulator expects confusion so they can steer it. But the empath offers neither. Instead, they offer grounded awareness, and nothing is more disarming to manipulation than someone who cannot be emotionally recruited into the game. This is why the super empath often becomes a target, not because they are weak, but because they are immune. And immunity is unforgivable to those who survive by exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. When the empath recognizes the trap before it is set, the manipulator loses control before they even take their first step. This ability makes the super empath a psychological anomaly, someone who cannot be deceived, distracted, or pulled into emotional chaos.
Perhaps one of the most misunderstood aspects of a true super empath is what happens when they finally reach their emotional limit. People assume that empaths are endlessly forgiving, endlessly patient, endlessly tolerant. And for a long time, they are. Not because they are weak, but because they genuinely try to understand, heal, and uplift the people around them. But when the line is crossed, something powerful awakens inside them. It is not aggression, impulsiveness, or uncontrolled emotion. It is something Jung would call the integrated shadow, a righteous, focused, deeply moral fury that comes from absolute clarity. This fury is not loud, it is not chaotic, it is not theatrical. It is precise. When a super empath finally confronts someone's toxic behavior, their words cut through illusion like a blade, because they come from a place of truth, not revenge. They articulate the exact pattern the other person has been trying to hide. They reveal the emotional truth with such accuracy that the manipulator feels exposed in a way they have never experienced. The empath's anger is not destructive, it is diagnostic. It reveals, identifies, and brings to light the very behaviors others refuse to see. People fear this because it is the moment the empath stops absorbing and starts reflecting. They no longer internalize the pain. They no longer excuse the cruelty. They no longer soften the truth to avoid conflict. Instead, they express a clarity that dismantles the entire dynamic. Jung famously wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The super empath embodies this. Their anger makes the darkness conscious, both theirs and the other person's. This righteous fury is the empath's final boundary, a boundary that cannot be manipulated or reversed. Once crossed, the empath sees the full truth of the situation, the pattern of disrespect, the emotional games, the exploitation of their kindness. And unlike most people who lash out impulsively, the empath responds with calm precision. They may withdraw completely, speak a truth that cannot be unspoken, or end the connection without hesitation. Their decision is final because it is based on internal certainty, not emotional impulsivity. This is what makes the super empath dangerous in the eyes of manipulators. Their fury is not a loss of control, it is the restoration of it. It is the moment they reclaim their energy and reveal the psychological dynamics that were operating beneath the surface. And once that truth is spoken or acted upon, the entire power structure collapses.
Another reason a true super empath is seen as dangerous lies in the way they love and the way they leave. A super empath does not form superficial connections. When they care with depth, intentionality, and emotional presence. They listen fully. They give generously. They show up in ways most people never experience in their lifetime. Their love is not dramatic or attention-seeking. It is steady, warm, and sincere. And because of this, people often mistake their openness for dependence. But this is the great misunderstanding. A super empath may love deeply, yet they are capable of walking away with absolute finality once the connection becomes harmful. This ability comes from self-awareness. Through their own suffering and introspection, the empath learns to recognize when a bond is no longer mutual, when their energy is being drained, or when love has turned into emotional labor. They do not leave impulsively, they leave wisely. They give chances until the truth becomes unavoidable. They offer understanding until the pattern becomes undeniable. And when the decision is made, it is not out of anger, it is out of clarity. This clarity becomes a kind of emotional liberation that many people don't expect because they assume the empath's attachment is permanent. Jung would say that this ability to detach comes from the integration of the inner archetypes. The empath's love is guided by their conscious self, not their wounds. They do not cling to the past. They do not negotiate their worth. They do not stay in relationships that violate their inner truth. And when they walk away, they do not leave cracking the door open. They close it completely, not to punish, but to protect their soul. For manipulative or self-centered personalities, this detachment feels like a devastating loss of power. Super empaths often serve as a source of emotional validation for others, a place where they feel understood, admired, or stabilized. When the empath withdraws, they take that validation with them, leaving the other person to face their own emptiness. This loss triggers panic, anger, or confusion because the manipulator never imagined the empath could leave so easily or so quietly. What makes the empath's departures so impactful is the contrast. They loved with depth, so their absence feels like a void. They gave consistently, so their silence feels like a mirror. And while many people struggle to detach, the super empath's ability to walk away without looking back sends a powerful message. Their love is a gift, not a weakness, and once that gift is misused, it will not be offered again. The final, and perhaps most intimidating reason a true super empath is considered dangerous is this. They know their own worth. Not in a superficial, performative way, but in a deep, unshakable, internally grounded sense of self. Empaths often begin life doubting their value because they're surrounded by people who take advantage of their sensitivity. But through pain, introspection, and the long journey of individuation, they eventually discover something powerful. Their emotional intelligence is not a burden, it is a gift. And once this realization takes root, they stop seeking permission to exist. When a super empath reaches this stage, they no longer tolerate situations that diminish them. They stop explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. They stop negotiating with those who disrespect their boundaries. They stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Their self-worth becomes a compass that guides every decision. Who they allow into their life, what energy they accept, and where they invest their emotional depth. This clarity immediately disrupts power dynamics, because many people rely on the empath's old habit of self-sacrifice. Jung would say that the empath's worth comes from integrating the persona and the shadow, from seeing themselves fully, both their light and their darkness. This integration gives them a grounded confidence that cannot be manipulated. They no longer feel the need to prove anything. They no longer fear abandonment. They no longer chase validation. Their sense of identity becomes self-generated, not dependent on external approval. This makes them emotionally autonomous in a way that most people never achieve. For narcissistic or controlling personalities, this is terrifying. Their influence comes from finding insecurities in others and exploiting them. But when someone stands in their presence with a stable sense of self-worth, the entire strategy collapses. The super empath sees through the charm, the manipulation, the guilt tactics, and the emotional hooks, and simply refuses to engage. They do not get pulled into psychological games because they know exactly who they are. This makes them immune to emotional possession. What makes the super empath truly untouchable is that they no longer measure their value by how much they are needed or appreciated. They measure it by how aligned they are with their truth. This alignment creates a peaceful strength that radiates from within, a presence that says, "I am here by choice, not by fear." And nothing threatens a manipulator more than someone who cannot be owned, controlled, or swayed. The super empath becomes a sovereign being, whole, aware, and self-defined. We live in a world that romanticizes the empath as fragile, sensitive, and endlessly forgiving. But this is only the surface-level myth, the version that benefits those who want empathy without accountability. The deeper truth, the one Jung would recognize instantly, is that a fully awakened empath is not fragile at all. They are forged, they are transformed, they are sharpened by the very experiences that once wounded them. And when that transformation is complete, the world no longer sees a gentle soul who can be shaped or controlled. It sees a human being who has become psychologically sovereign. Throughout this exploration, you've seen why the myth of the soft empath collapses in the presence of a super empath. Their perception makes deception impossible. Their emotional depth exposes the shadows others try to hide. Their clarity disrupts manipulation before it begins. Their righteous anger reveals truths that no one else dares to speak. Their ability to love deeply and leave completely dismantles toxic dynamics with a single decision. And their unshakable sense of self-worth makes them immune to the psychological traps that once held them down. A super empath does not seek to be dangerous. They become dangerous only because they live in truth, while many others live in fear of it. Their power is not loud, it is steady. Their strength is not aggressive, it is conscious. Their presence is not threatening, it is illuminating. And illumination always provokes those who prefer the comfort of their own darkness. If you recognized pieces of yourself in this video, understand this clearly. Nothing about your strength is accidental. You did not become powerful out of nowhere. You became powerful because you survived, you reflected, you transformed, and you integrated the parts of yourself others told you to hide. Your intuition is not a flaw. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. Your depth is not a burden. These are your tools. They always were. The world does not fear the empath because they feel too much. The world fears the empath because they see too clearly. And when a human being sees clearly, without illusion, without denial, without self-betrayal, they become something rare. Someone who cannot be manipulated, diminished, or controlled. If that is you, do not shrink. Do not apologize. Do not dim what took you years to awaken. Your power is the proof that your soul has returned to itself.